Hey guys, and welcome to one more episode of Builder Nation. For today's agenda, we have Joyce. I'm not quite sure, so I'm gonna let her say her last name because I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Joyce
Sidopoulos.
Sidopoulos. Thank you so much. Co-founder and vice president for programs and community at MassRobotics. So welcome, Joyce. Super happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I've listened to lots of your interviews, so I love it.
Hi, thank you so much.
So co-founding MassRobotics was a long task, basically task of love, I'd say. And my background is I'm an electrical engineer. I like to say my career was in three phases. I worked for the Navy, very technical, as a kind of science advisor and sonar expert for the first third. The next third, I did business development for the Air Force and other government agencies. And then this third is more focused on robotics. And then somewhere in there, there's the family piece, and that's another like third. So really 4/3, I guess.
How did you first got into robotics? Because I mean, you have like different paths, just like you're saying, mechanical engineering. I know that you studied at UConn at some point in Connecticut.
No. Oh, at UConn, I did some computer science classes. Yeah.
Okay.
So my sisters went to UConn. I'm from Connecticut, so I did a lot of summer work in computer science. But I went to Cornell for electrical engineering. And I'd say, first of all, robotics starts with Star Wars. I mean, who doesn't love robots when you watch Star Wars, right? Everybody falls in love with R2-D2 and C-3PO. So I always loved it. But I think for me, getting started in robotics was more. A lot of things in my career happened by chance, and you have to just take advantage of those chances. And so I had left one job, and someone saw that I had put an end date on my LinkedIn profile. And so they said, hey, you would be great at running this robotics cluster. Why don't you come over and join us? And so that's basically how I started. So it was kind of by chance, but at the same time, robotics is a combination of so many disciplines. Right? It's a combination of engineering and design and human robot interface. So there's a lot of, computation and sensing. And, I go back to my Navy days when I was working with sonar, and understanding waves and sound in water is the same thing as any kind of sensor, collecting information from the environment, computing, and then figuring out what to do with it. And so robotics is the same thing, right? It's sensing your environment, sensing what's around you, collecting information, computing, using that information to actuate and do things. So that's kind of how got started.
How you got into the industry. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. And one thing is jumping into the industry, and another one is like founding a company regarding this.
Right. So MassRobotics is a nonprofit. And we chose to do that because when we were starting the company, we thought there's lots of grants out there that could kind of help us get started. We thought there's lots of companies that could donate to us and they could use that as a tax write-off. So that was one of the kind of motivations to making it a nonprofit. But really, it was a combination of a lot of people coming together at the right time, putting together the right plan. So, there are 5 co-founders that are officially listed, but honestly, there's probably 20 people who had a lot of influence on how we started the company. And it's very different being a nonprofit and being a for-profit, right? For-profits, a lot of times the startups are 2 co-founders who have more of a technical idea. The idea for MassRobotics came from the cluster itself. So, running the robotics cluster, understanding the needs of the industry, seeing that startups were really having a tough time. There's this valley of death where you have this awesome idea, but now you need to prototype. And if you're not at a university, you don't have all the tools you need to prototype. Tools can be very expensive. 3D printers can be expensive, and CNC machines and lathes. And so we had this idea of why don't we build a space where startups have access to all of that. And it's not just the hardware, it's software design licenses, and it's cloud computing services. And so slowly we started coming up with, and had a lot of focus groups using our cluster here in Boston. We had a startup focus group, we had a services focus group, we had a corporate like a corporate companies focus group to see how can we all kind of pitch in together to make something like this center work. And so we came up with an awesome business plan of how it would be funded. Again, I still consider us a startup because we're constantly in, I'd say, collection mode of trying to figure out how we're going to sustain and keep corporate partners and keep funding coming in. So we're always fundraising, always.
Wow.
Same with a startup, right? A startup is always fundraising. Even when you close a round, you're still thinking of, okay, when is this going to run out? When do I need my next funding? So you're always thinking. So really, MassRobotics was founded by a lot of people who had great ideas on how do we grow the robotics ecosystem and what does industry need from robotics. So,
wow. Okay, so that is how MassRobotics was born. And another question, like, why Boston? Why Massachusetts? I was reading that actually Boston is kind of like the leader in the industry, but why? What's the main reason for that?
So one, Boston has the highest density of universities than anywhere in the US. So people are familiar with MIT and Harvard, Northeastern, Boston University, but there's also a lot of other technical universities like WPI and Wentworth and Olin College. So there's a lot of very technical, UMass has a great engineering school. So there's a lot of entrepreneurship programs and highly technical universities that are putting out engineers. So the talent pool is here. So when you're a startup, really the two things that you're really looking for the most, and the challenges I think they have the most are funding, of course, and talent. So we have the talent pool here. So we have the entrepreneurs who have ideas to start companies. Then we have the talent pool to help those companies grow. We also have a very strong venture capital association and the New England Venture Capital Association. And it's a really large group of VCs who are in the group and are investing in robotics and tough tech. So we have that. So we also have the services community. So we have a lot of designers, all of the IP law firms and marketing firms. So we have like that whole kind of ecosystem that helps startups. And then we have a lot of incubators and accelerators. So we have Mass Challenge, we have Techstars, and so lots of little accelerators kind of around the area. Boston is really known for entrepreneurship. So those kind of accelerators, incubators really help the startups understand how to get their pitch deck together, how to do market surveys, how to find your customers. And so I feel like Boston has such a good combination of all those things that feed into an ecosystem. And robotics is just one of those that needs all of those things.
Okay, nice, really interesting. And I mean, okay, so MassRobotics, it's not only startups then, it's also like industry connections. I was reading something that you had like a partnership with companies like Amazon or like Mitsubishi or stuff like that. So how is that related into the business, into the industry? Like what happens there?
Right. So our business basically runs with 3 funding sources. Okay. One of the funding sources is our partners. So they help fund us. And they do that for many reasons. One, they want to understand what technology is coming out of the robotics ecosystem. How can that help my company, right? All companies have logistics and warehousing, or they have manufacturing. So they're all looking for what's the next thing and how do I stay on top of the technology and what's coming out. So they're interested in that. They're interested in connecting with our startups to see, oh, maybe there's somebody working on something that is solving one of my challenges. And so sometimes we run challenges with our corporate partners. And sometimes they are a company that makes motors or a company that makes actuators or that makes gears, and they want to make sure that they're embedded in a startup system and ecosystem so that when somebody's designing something, they're using their motor so that when they expand and accelerate and escalate, they're using a lot of their motors, right? So they want to get in early. So there's lots of reasons why the corporates want to be partners and part of the ecosystem. So that's one of our sources of funding. The other is our residents who are here. So our startups who are here do pay a fee to be in the space, to have access to all of the things we have to offer. And then the third is our grants. So we go after national and state grants.
Wow. And how many startups do you currently have, or how many startups did you start up with?
So last we checked at our 5-year anniversary, we had something like 115 startups who have kind of come through the space. I think
Wow.
now we're at 130. And we have about 65 who are residents now, currently residents. There are from all over the world. We have Singapore, Israel, as far as Switzerland, Spain, and then all over the US. So a lot of states are represented here. They find us and they realize that this is a great place to start a company and to grow a company. So they come
Wow.
and they get networked in, and we have VC industry days where we invite venture capitalists and angel investors into our space so they can see what our startups are working on. We do a lot of very curated events around specific industries. So we'll do an event around manufacturing, and we'll have manufacturers come in, talk about their challenges, and then our startups who have solutions for them will get to pitch and demo. We do that, in many areas: defense, medical. We've done a food tech. We've done construction, robotics and construction. So we find these people who have a challenge that robotics and AI kind of technology can solve.
And I know that you're in charge of developing the programs. So how is that like? How is your everyday like? How is this part of, okay, you're not only the founder of the company, but you're also like developing the actual programs. So
right. And it's changing all the time, depending on who has a need and who has a challenge, right? So people come to us just on our website. They'll send a little inquiry. I have a problem with such and such. Can you help me? Sometimes it turns into a program. Sometimes it's just a simple introduction. But the programming is super fun. Always learning. There's always something to learn about an industry. You can't be an expert in every industry. So every time we bring an industry in and do a focus session, let's say around construction, there's something to learn, right? And a lot of times our startups are working on really crazy solutions for things. And then the industry will come in and say, well, we're looking for something that can solve this problem. And they'll say, oh my gosh, that's so easy. Why are we solving all of this when we just need to solve this piece? And they'll be happy, right? So it kind of helps our startups focus on what the real challenge is that they should be trying to solve. So it's nice when you see the aha go on. You can see it happening when they're watching someone talk about what their challenge is, and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I can do that. That's like so easy.
Wow. And most of the, I mean, I'm not quite sure, but most of the residents are also students, like doing a master's degree or something like that, or they have been past that already?
They're past that. So most of the residents are, and we have all ages, but most of them, I'd say, are 30s, early 30s is probably the average age. Some of them actually, it's their third startup and they're more my age. So it really is a wide range, and they have to be a company. So it's post-student. Okay. Once the students graduate and they become a company, and we're not what you'd say is traditionally an accelerator or an incubator. So those types of spaces, you apply, you get in, and there's like a very focused 12 weeks of heavy mentoring. And for those 12 weeks, you're getting your business plan together, you're putting your pitch deck together and all that. We take people from accelerators. So when you finish a program like that, you can come to MassRobotics and you have a little bit of funding, and we help you kind of escalate, take it to the next level, help you meet manufacturers, and help you find actual real customers. So we kind of take you
to the next level.
That. Right.
Wow, that must
so
be.
That's super fun, because really there's no other place that we know that is doing this.
And I've never heard of this before, even though, I mean, we're in this still industry, robotics industry, but this is great because, okay, yes, you can have a nice idea of a startup. You might have even the software, the hardware, but if you don't know how to develop that or take that to the next step or pitch it in the right way for the customers, then, I mean,
right.
You don't have a business.
One thing that we do that our startups really love is we have a couple of peer groups. And one of the peer groups is just for the CEOs. And they get together once a month and we bring a topic in for them. And it's great to see them talking to each other because, these startups who come out of a university, they're usually two technical co-founders. And so they're struggling to understand how to do a pitch deck because they're an engineer. And so they're developing the technical solution. And so sometimes they need help in telling a story, right? Storytelling and showing the usefulness of whatever your product is and putting like a little personality into the pitches and those kinds of things. So they're not used to that. And so it's awesome when we bring together the CEOs and they help each other. They said, oh, have you ever thought about this? Or they'll be at a resident brunch and you'll see companies talking to each other. And sometimes the best part of it is when they collaborate and they come up with a solution together. So there's two companies that are completely separate. They meet and they realize that their technologies can come together to solve a different solution. And so we have a couple of companies doing that now.
What do you think is the field that it's most relevant, if we can put it like that, right now? Like, I don't know, drone companies or agriculture or the surgical path?
So I'll tell you what's really hot since COVID is logistics and warehousing. And I'd say in the future, it's going to be delivery. But, if you think about the pandemic and everybody's home and ordering online, it's going to be picking and putting things in boxes and being able to get them out to the customer, right? And so, Amazon does a great job at that, and they've been doing it for years, but now all of these other companies are having mail orders, right? Online orders. And so how do you get that to the customer quickly? And so a lot of the automation we're seeing is happening in warehousing and logistics and packaging and sending and that kind of thing. And I think the next wave will be the delivery, the end delivery piece of it, right? So right now you actually have physically a guy who comes in on your UPS truck and he brings it to your doorstep. How can you kind of automate that? And I think that's the next kind of wave we're going to see. There will be things holding that back, like policy, and policy always lags technology a little bit, or sometimes a lot. But that I feel like that's the next. Drones are making a lot of progress as well. And they're being used for a lot of good situations, like inspecting power lines, right? Helping with forest fires. And so there's a lot of things that drones can do and go into dangerous places that aren't safe for people. So I feel like they're making a lot of progress on that front too. But the whole ordering online, no one's going to go back and say, oh, now I think I'm going to go to the store to pick up my milk. When
no one's going to the store anymore.
No one's going back.
Are there any critical challenges you have faced in the project development part when it comes to purchasing?
So I think, COVID has really helped us understand where the bottlenecks are in supply chain. Mm-hmm. So, things coming out of areas where the pandemic was really challenging stopped. And so a lot of companies had to figure out how to pivot and use other hardware or how to design a little bit differently or develop new things. So it was definitely a challenge. I think in general, before the pandemic, things seemed to be in surplus and it wasn't as difficult. But I think since the pandemic, I think people are really thinking how they're designing and trying to be more conservative.
Okay. And are there any critical, what do you think is the biggest technical challenge, talking about yourself, Joyce, that you have ever solved? I mean, talking in the robotics field.
Oh boy. I'd say in general for MassRobotics, the challenge is the same as it is for startups. It's funding. It just seems like that's always going to be a challenge and something you're always going to have to be thinking about, right? It's making good hires, right? Finding the right people to help run the organization, the way you envision it being run. That's a little bit of a challenge, but we have found great staff. So we're super lucky here at MassRobotics. All the staff are 2 feet in, all about helping the startups and helping them succeed. So I'd say our challenge is running out of space quite often.
Wow.
Because as we grow, we've already expanded twice, and now we're out of space again. And so we're looking for our next expansion. So we're always looking for the next thing.
And where do you think is going to be the next place for MassRobotics? You have 2 already in Boston. Am I correct?
Well, we're actually, we started on 1 floor, and we
Okay.
had like 15,000 square feet. We expanded to another floor. We added 25,000 square feet. We just added a STEM laboratory so we can have more students come in and experience robotics and what the careers could look like. So we've secured space for that on a different floor. And now we're looking at expanding on the floor we're on another, 5,000 square feet, because people come in and they say, we need 2,000 square feet. And we'll say, oh my gosh, we're full, we don't have it. So we have to constantly be juggling and figuring out where people can go. And, when people outgrow our space, we help them find space that's local so they can still come in and have access to our machines and come to our events and that kind of thing.
Okay, and last but not least, do you have any advice for future entrepreneurs starting on this tech path?
Oh, just stick with it. It takes a long time. Hardware companies are hard. That's why they're called hardware, I think. It's hard. It takes, really, a lot of our startups have been at it for 5 years, and they're still seeking funding. It really is a long, difficult path, but it is so worth it in the end when you find that customer and someone who can adopt your technology and you see it moving along. It really is so rewarding. So I would say really have a purpose and be following that purpose, and don't give up. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that come along the way. I just read an article that was talking about what it's like to be a startup compared to what it's like to be in a big company. And they compared it to the streets of New York versus the streets of Boston. So the streets in New York have all of these, they're all this way or this way. They're squares, they're all avenues and streets, and everything is like just nicely placed. And if you look at the streets in Boston, they're all over the place because it's crazy. And they showed a map of the 2 of them. And that's what it's like to be a startup. You have to pivot a ton of times. You have to, find your way. And it's always, you're learning along the way. You don't have one little thing that you do, you're doing it all. So you're learning what you need to learn to get to the next step. And then you're learning what you need to learn here to get to the next step. And it's constantly learning. So great mentors always help. So, we help with that. But I'd say you have to love to learn.
You have to love to learn in order to build a startup or to be in a startup.
Right.
Okay. Wow. This is great. I loved the analogy. Thank you so much, Joyce. I was actually picturing, the streets. I've been to New York. I've been to Boston. I know what it's like, and I know what it's like to be in a startup. So totally.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, Joyce, for being here and taking the time. Do you have any social media handles? Where can people find you? Where can people follow you?
Yep. So we do have Twitter account at MassRobotics, super easy. My Twitter account is Joyce4Girls. And part of that is because of my 4 daughters, but also we have a lot of girls science programs that we do here at MassRobotics. And we're on LinkedIn. And it would be great to follow our newsletter. You can register to sign up for our newsletter. It's a bi-weekly newsletter. Talks all about what's going on in the industry, what's going on, what events are coming up, all that kind of stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to follow you there. And remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews just like this one with Joyce directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We would love to hear from you. And once again, Joyce, thank you so much. This was amazing. Super excited to hear about MassRobotics, to know more about the company, and to know about the event you're having in October. Totally.
Excellent. Yes. Always happy to talk about MassRobotics.
Thank you.